We remember this, right? Remember these guys playing chess?
Mm-hmm.
What is this?
Conflict.
Conflict. And where's the camera? On a tripod.
Stationary.
Stationary, not moving. And what kind of conflict is it?
Human versus human.
Human versus human. So way back in the beginning of the program when we showed you this and we were making the point about it's all about shot sequencing, and you know, you could take this film, which is innately boring in real time, and just by moving the camera around, make it interesting. But there was conflict there, and it was human versus human. Watch the shot sequence again. Where is the shot sequence version? I want you to watch the shot sequence again. Notice the camera placement.
Checkmate.
So this morning, I was really struck by your answers when I asked what was the difference between the two. Mm-hmm. Because every one of you said, well, I could feel the tension with the shot sequenced version. And this is such a great way to point out that it's not the shot sequencing itself that keeps things more interesting. It's not that just you have a close-up of this and a wide shot of this, and it's that, although that does help to make the film more interesting. It's the fact that what you're pointing out gives you a up-close and personal way of feeling the emotion or the conflict that's already present. That conflict existed with the video camera on a tripod. But your answers from this morning were so great because what it told everybody was, with the shot sequence version, you were able to feel it in a way that you couldn't feel it when it was just shot on a tripod. And that's what your job as a filmmaker is Ross said this 2 or 3 times in the past 5 minutes. The conflict is there. It's your job to draw out the emotion through the way in which you select your shots and then put them together so that the viewer can feel and identify the conflict.
Yeah, life will present the conflict, and the filmmaker must make the audience feel the conflict.
And we had a really long discussion about this last night because, you know, my role here a lot of times is I come from the photography background. I don't think like he does. I don't inherently understand filmmaking principles the way that he does. And yet, because I come from this tradition of education with photographers because of Monty, and because our equipment now gives us the ability to do this, how do we take what he knows and what his background is and translate it into our own experience in a way that we can grasp it, that we can understand it, and that we can go duplicate it so we're making great films for our clients and doing something that's really more fulfilling. And let me tell you, once you get the filmmaking bug, you kind of want to stop taking pictures a little bit. It's really, really addicting, so be careful. But when we were discussing this, I'm like, Ross, you know what, with your conflict stuff, I understand what you're saying. I see the 6 categories and they make intellectual sense to me, but I have no idea what that means for me as a photographer or as a filmmaker. How am I supposed to take what I see here and use it in a way that's going to improve my films? I don't understand. We got into this, guess what, a little conflict at the table, trying to figure out how to present it. And when he was in the middle of explaining it, he's like, it's just like that chess piece. You know, the conflict was there, but when you watch it on the tripod, you don't feel it. It's the shot sequencing that allows you to feel it. And that's when it clicked for me. That's when it was like, got it. So Ross is really, really advanced in thinking like filmmakers. We can take all of these things, break them down into their individual components, and then use them in a way that makes sense. So now when you think about shooting your film or what your story is, you'll be able to not just identify conflict and say, okay, there's going to be conflict in the situation, what is it? But now, how can I choose my shots in such a way that it'll really highlight it? For example, when Ross did Ruthie opening the gift, he did a close-up on her face while she's reading to heighten that emotion and that tension or the feeling of love that's present from her reading this. If he had done it from way back, it wouldn't have felt the same way. So it's finding where that conflict is, where that emotion is, and then pulling it out of the situation. And
I love, what's so funny is I'm on a lot of film sets. I've done 6 feature films, short films, TV pilots, commercials, whatever. And the first time I heard this was in my first movie ever, and our music supervisor was there. And he was standing over here, okay, right here, and I was over here framing the shot, and he said the words that you never say on a film set. Yo, you should put the camera over here, it looks really cool. First of all, if you're on a film set, it's like that's not proper etiquette. You don't ever tell the director where to put the camera. But if you understand what he said, it's put the camera over here, it looks cool. First of all, you cannot look at a shot with your eyes because you have 2 eyes and the camera only has 1. Okay, so you need to see things with 1 eye. That's number 1. Number 2, camera angles do not determine conflict. Conflict determines where you put the camera. So when you're framing your shots and we talk about wide, medium, close, yes, those have emotional impact, but the camera angle in which you shoot it has psychological impact on your story.
By camera angle, you're referring to where the placement of the camera is in relation to the subject.
Exactly. Height of the camera, the angle of the face, whatever it may be. The angle will have psychological effect on the story. And the reason why I wanted you to watch the chess piece, the shot sequence version, is because it's no coincidence where the camera is pointing on the characters, and the emotion that you're feeling it's not by accident. It's because of where I put the camera in relation with the music, to the cutting. Everything all comes together to be one film, and you don't see the elements, but I want to train you, and I want to train everyone at home. When you see a movie, it's like when they see I talk about a great quarterback or a great point guard, they see the game in slow motion. They always say that. It's a quote. Everything's happening so fast, but they see it in slow motion. You need to be able to watch movies in slow motion and see the elements, see the editing, see the cinematography, feel the emotion of the scene, and see, well, where's the camera angle? So let's get into what camera angles mean and how they work. These are the camera angles that we're going to talk about, okay? They all have a psychological impact. And let's talk about the high angle shot. The camera's placed above the subject, okay? Pointing down on the subject to put them in a vulnerable position. So the loser of that chess match, if you go back and watch it, almost every shot of him the camera is above his head, shooting down on him to make it feel vulnerable. And we're going to see it again tomorrow, so you can look for that, okay? And here's what it looks like.
That work on both the emotional and unpleasant physical symptoms of depression. Visit depressionhurts.ca to learn more about these symptoms.
So you see, camera's way above her. Notice the framing of the shot. Look at all that negative space behind her. And I put her at the bottom right of the frame. I didn't put her up and fill the frame with her. I put all the space above her head and behind her. So there's two psychological things going with the framing. I leave all that negative space, show empty chairs, and show that she's isolated and alone. And then I put the camera down on her, and then of course she is watching the commercial that is from my film that we watched the intro for, that you saw her anyway. Low angle shot. This is to put the camera goes down and you shoot up on your character to put them in a position of power. Go back to the chess thing. We'll see it again tomorrow. But the winner, every shot of him was from an up angle. The shot through the railing was like this. There was almost a shot under him, shooting right up on him.
There was, yeah. Under the table, through the glass.
All of those things put him in the position of power. You don't see it and recognize it when it's happening, but you feel it in real time. And it all goes back to what Jeff made the point with the pictures, with the photographs. You're looking at a photograph and you have time to reflect. In film, all it is reaction, 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 reaction. And you have no time to sort of process. So that's why all these tricks work, because there's no time to actually think about what it looks like.
If we were to have filmed that in the opposite way, where the loser was always in a position of power from camera angle and vice versa, and use exactly the same shots in exactly the same order, with the exception of the angle, it would feel very, very different.
It would still work, but it wouldn't feel the same way. You wouldn't feel the victory and the defeat for each character. And this is, Clay Blackmore is a good friend of ours, and me and him would get in, you know, we went on a 30-city tour together, so we got in arguments every flight. We would annoy people on camera position, because I understand the photographer's mindset where shooting down on a person makes them look thinner and shooting up on a person makes them look heavier, right? In film, you're gonna have to let that go and understand that the psychological impact matters more. And that's my opinion on camera position and height. For filmmaking, you can take your photography knowledge and try to fuse it in with that. My personal advice is stick with the psychological impact that these shots have. Take a look at what a low angle shot does to a person in a position of power. And the person he's talking to, notice how the camera's pointing down on him. And there is a high angle shot in here as well.
Paul, you're not gonna get away with this. One phone call to my uncle.
Listen, Bryce, really carefully. Now, your uncle, my boss, he presented us with a problem in which we solve will take us right to the top. And just because things are getting harder instead of easier, you just want to throw in the white flag. That is unacceptable. And you want to find out what your uncle will say? Let's do it. Sam, get John on the line.
So what happened there? He's having an intense conversation. There's conflict. The one character who's in the vulnerable position, the camera's slightly above him. Camera's shooting way up on our character in power. And then what happened halfway through the scene? It went from a wide shot into a medium shot, or even I would call it a medium slash close-up.
Still a lower camera angle.
Still a lower camera angle. So you notice how as the intensity of the scene peaked, I went in to just basically, as I've never met Monty, but I heard Jeff quote him a million times, remove the distractions. When it's time to focus in psychologically on what someone's saying, remove the distractions and go in close to him and really get that impact. Let's talk about an eye level shot. Zero psychological effect whatsoever, but so important, because if you don't get this right, all of your other shots are affected. It's just like the close-up. If you use the close-up so much, too much, which I was guilty of a few years ago, close-up happy, I would call myself. And I look at that film now and I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Right? Because they're easier to make than wide shots. All your shots lose their impact, and then you don't have any control over...
No reference point.
Yeah, you have no control over the psychological impact of each shot. So take a look at what a eye-level shot looks like, and it's really designed to let the person in front of the camera take over and do whatever it is that they have the ability to do.
Kidding me? Are you serious? I mean, the honeymoon is it's the greatest show ever. Gleason and Connie, they're hilarious. To the moon, Alice. I soil every time I watch that show. Yeah. What do you like? Family Affair. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. It's Mr. French. He's a riot. Who's your favorite stooge? Larry? You're not right. You're just not right. Frontal lobotomy. I gotta go. I got a client.
Clyde, what a character he is. But you see, no psychological effect. We really didn't feel anything. If we thought it was funny, great. If we didn't think it was funny, whatever. But the point is in that scene, it does come to a peak of psychology. There is a climax to that scene. There's a point. So it's very important that I intro the scene correctly with eye-level shots, so that when it's time to divvy out the positions of power, when it's time to make that impact, there's a difference in the way the shot looks, which will, make you guys, the viewers, feel what I want you to feel. Point of view shot. I love first person view. That's like one of my favorite things. And Scott, if Scott's watching, he's probably laughing right now because he knows exactly what I'm going to say. But me and Scott came up together as filmmakers, and there's two things he would yell at me all the time for, is you do first person view way too much and you do too much voiceover. Well, I'm guilty as charged, but I really do like it because first person view is designed to give you that, you see what the character sees, and this is done a lot when you're doing a first person narrative type of story. Now we're not going to get into the types of narratives, that's really deep into psychology of filmmaking, but it is in my book. Let's take a look at what the point of view shot looks like and how you sort of establish that. So you see, show the character, show what they're seeing. And there's like I said, every sequence has a climax. Show him, he shakes the 8-ball up, and he's looking at it, and you see his reaction to it, and what's the first thing you think? What's the 8-ball say? And the moment you ask that question, I have you. You're done. Because I can make that 8-ball say
Ruthie
anything.
reading the card, showing the card was first-person view.
Yes, first-person view. So what does that mean? If the foreground of the back of his head was in the shot, that would not be first person. I have to sort of come in to the direct view of the character. And we probably will do this in the shoot tomorrow, where I'll show first-person views of what Kevin's seeing in the shoot, and I'll explain why I'm doing it in certain spots, because you can't just overuse it, or Scott will yell at you. I hope he's watching. That would be so funny. Bird's eye view. We've seen this a lot, and it's basically the camera goes where the bird would go, and you're just shooting above someone's head, and you're seeing what they see. And here we're in the lab. He's making his antidepressants, and we have the camera up. And we use this to establish a lot. We want to have the audience sort of look over the scene in an unexpected, almost non-human vantage point, if that makes sense. You got to think about the camera is the viewer. That's what the camera is. So every time you place it in a position, the height, the lens you put on it, the movement you're going to add to it, you, the filmmaker, are telling the viewer, this is how I want you to view this shot. This is how I want you to view this scene. I can put the viewer anywhere in the room I want, and I'm putting it here, and always ask yourself, why? Dutch camera angle. This is not something I do often, so I don't even have a clip to show you, but basically all it is just tilt the camera slightly off axis, and you're just supposed to give a feeling of disorientation. So if you have a scene where you want a character or something to feel disoriented, if you just have the camera and you turn it like this, it'll feel disoriented. And the best way to make this successful is to have a very descript background. So if you tip a camera in photography and there's like just a background, like a plain background, you won't see the tip. It'll just frame the shot the way you want. But if you do it and there's a building behind you, it'll look like the building's falling over. And that's like a no-no in photography. In filmmaking, that's the whole idea, is to make it look like the world's tipping over. Just slightly, not like, don't shoot vertical. You can't shoot vertical video, but just turn it slightly like that and you'll get that concept.
Weren't the chess pieces tipped a little bit?
No.
No. It's just not shot parallel.
Not shot straight on. So everyone's been asking, what's the instant where there is no conflict? And I like to call that a high concept film. And I started out in filmmaking as a script writer. And that's how I was playing professional poker and writing scripts simultaneously. And that's how I started. And the one thing I learned from submitting scripts to studios and, pitch people, whatever, they would always ask for a high concept film. A lot of people ask for this. And basically the idea is, if your film cannot be described in one sentence, not high concept. If you have to elaborate any more on what it is, then it doesn't fall in the category of high concept. Same thing goes for short films like we're making with weddings and birth announcements and things like that. There might not always be conflict. That may not be the best way to go. So you might want to do something like a concept film. So here is another film from our friends at Every Nun.
The Moments film that we watched earlier is high concept.
Yeah.
The idea is there's a concept, there are all these moments, they're all connected together, and there's no conflict. There's a concept that you're trying to get your viewer to be attached to and interested in and thinking about in relation to their own life.
And the cool thing about that one is we don't even really know what the concept is, and that's sort of what it's up to the viewer. When I see that film, I think it's the senses. It's the 5 senses. Some people think life. Some people think, oh, it's a series of moments that collect, but that's the fun of it. Yes?
I just have a comment that I love, that a question had come in about what was the conflict in that, in the Moments film.
There wasn't. High concept.
They're paying attention. They're smart. They're getting it.
Awesome.
So we have another film by Every Nun. Again, that's everynun, None.com. You can go. This one's called Words.
And it's not even a sentence. It's just one word, words. And this is what a concept film would look like.
as Jim is pinching.
Play ball!
Breaking up, man. I can't hear you.
Run away. I'm serious. I'm gonna run away.
Flight 022, maintain approach. You're clear for runway 27.
That is not gonna fly.
I've fallen, and I...
Light as a feather, come on. Light as a feather. Light.
Let there be light!
Every night. So you see, with that, everything was camera on a tripod, right? There was no shot sequencing because there was one take, one scene, or every shot had nothing in its own environment connected to it, and yet the concept, everything relates to itself. So great storytelling. Do we have time for questions, or should we do that after a break?
I think we can take a couple questions to finish out this segment. So,
Do it.
Mallory, you want to start?
Sure. We have Fashion TV from Singapore. Hi, Fashion TV. How do you determine how long, how many seconds or minutes, etc., you need to capture all of the different angles and shots to be impactful? Is there a guideline for all of these different angles?
Oh, what's the last question?
Is there a guideline for all of the angles?
In terms of length,
I
of the
think he's
shots.
asking for length.
Yeah.
So just how long you recommend from each angle?
I'm not going to say that there is a set length for each angle because that has to do with pace of a film. I thought the question was going to be
really excited.
how long the films are supposed to be, and if everyone has a pen, please write this down. It should be as long as it is good.
But you just talked about the fourth section.
I did?
Yeah.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So forget he
Pretty
said
good.
that,
Pretty good.
and don't tweet it as a good quote until after we talk about it in the next section.
Suspense.
But showing shots and angles and things of that nature is all about the pace of a film. And that is going to just come with editing stuff. And I even tell people, like, screw up. Just don't be afraid to just take chances and edit things and see how they fit, how they work, and you'll start to feel the pace of a film. You can feel it. It's like a rhythm. You know, bob your head to the music. You know, you can't dance, but you should be able to bob your head on the beat.
If it drags to you, that may be a good indication, depending on your tolerance for pain. But if it drags to a random stranger, which is probably the best way to check, somebody who's not interested in you or your project or whatever, and they're watching it, and they're like, yeah, this drags, then that's probably the best way to determine. When somebody who's uninterested in you or your project looks at it and says, it's too long, or it's...
I would never put anything out there on YouTube or my clients without having just some random people watch it, because after you've edited it, you're numb. You don't know.
And the clients are going to like it because it's of them, right? So they're not going to tell you the truth anyway. So always have a random person check you.
I keep talking about my friends Scott and Jeff. They actually both think very similar, and I am on this other side of the spectrum of life. And when I have them critique my film, it's like, this is how I do. They are sitting, and I'm like pacing behind them, and I can just see them thinking all the terrible thoughts, right? And I hate the way they think in a lot of situations, and I hate the way they critique. But it's a necessary critique, because I always say, when I'm the writer of a project, I just did a TV pilot, and I was the writer, and I directed it. I won't edit it. I can't. It's too much Ross. It's too much of my stamp, too much of my voice. So you have to get other voices in there. So that's why I like getting critiques by Jeff and by Scott, is because I know their minds of film are so across the spectrum. We don't like the same movies. We can't agree on anything. And that's the idea, is sort of a checks and balances system in film, because too much of anything is bad. You don't want to be templated into a style, so to speak.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, one more quick question from Duke in Park City. So during a story, would you, for example, use a high angle approaching, sorry, somebody just, oh, there we go. Would you use a high angle approaching conflict and switch to a low angle during resolution? Is that something that you might do?
Think of the angles as in who you're shooting, the character, and what's their role in the story. So I use the high angle if I want to make somebody feel vulnerable. So like we showed the shot of her watching the antidepressant commercial. I want people to feel sorry for her. So I put the camera up high. Sometimes I may put the camera at a higher angle and shoot down on a bride, because they're female, sometimes they're crying, and they're vulnerable in that emotional moment of exchanging wedding vows. So just arcing the camera up a little bit is going to enhance that a little more. And then if somebody's giving a great speech at a wedding, and it's like the best man's speech, and he's got a drink in his hand, he's feeling real good, I may put the camera just a little bit lower and make him feel a little more powerful and a little more authoritative, right? People will listen to his speech more as opposed to putting the camera up higher. So think about what the character's role in the conflict is, not so much the conflict itself, what you're trying to make the viewer perceive that character as.